Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and today we kick off the second video in the trilogy of the Knights of Lastwall based archetype feats. This time, we're going to be talking about the Knight Reclaimant. So, the Knight Reclaimant archetype is mostly orientated around mixing some smitey paladin-esque spellcasting in a way, with stealth and the ability to traverse hostile terrain. That's about it. It's a very strange archetype. I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of things that I've kind of tripped over reading through this, and it's quite an archetype. So honestly, I do recommend you stick through this video because there's a lot of feats in here that are just a little wonky. I think the idea is really cool, especially since the whole idea of the Knights Reclaimants is they eventually get access to this crimson power from an unknown source that the founder, Clarith Imodar, gained access to. The thing is, it's just, it feels like a lot of different type, and to be fair, this particular archetype takes from three sources. It takes from the character guide, the core book, because it has additional feats from classes, and of course the Knights of Lastwall book that came out specifically for the Knights of Lastwall stuff. But the design elements are a bit wonky, and you'll see why. So let's go ahead and just get into the dedication itself. So one of the very weird things about this particular archetype is, unlike the Hell Knights, where you have to be an Armiger first before you can either become a Hell Knight or the magic one, I can't remember at this moment. This one doesn't have that requirement, but that is the intent. Actually, if I scroll up here a little bit, you can see that these particular archetypes are uncommon but available to members of the Knights of Lastwall. Qualifying characters with the Lastwall Sentry archetype can select one of these dedications, even yada yada yada, the same thing. But that's not in the actual feats requirements. You can see here the prerequisites are that you're trained in stealth and survival and of any non-evil alignment, which is going away. Yet it will probably just be changed to uphold the edicts of the Knights of Lastwall. And you must be a member of the Knights of Lastwall of Knight rank, which, is an organization thing. Should be more of an access thing, in my opinion, but Hell Knight did this as well. But nowhere does it mention that you need to be a Lastwall Sentry, even though these dedications are available to the Lastwall Sentry. I feel like that's the intent, but I guess technically by this description, you don't have to actually be a Lastwall Sentry to gain access to these. It's just for the uncommon tag, you to gain access to it, you must be a Lastwall Sentry. I don't know. It's very bizarre indeed. But I guess again, if you don't care about access, which is mostly for society play, then anyone can become a Knight Reclaimant without being a Lastwall Sentry. It just felt like that was kind of their intent, but oh well. Anyway, the dedication itself is actually not that bad. Now, it requires to be trained in stealth and survival, and you gain expert in stealth and survival when you select this dedication. So that's also really good. That means that you automatically get 2 proficiencies as long as you haven't already done so, which it would be recommended that you didn't, just so you could get the benefit of these proficiencies, as it doesn't state that you can become trained in another skill if you already have them, which is understandable, but again, not quite the standard for what they do for their archetypes. Now, this next part is actually very potent. Whenever you roll a success on a saving throw against an undead special ability, you get a critical success instead. Now, that's very strange. What's a special ability? That's good, but also vague. Like special ability, and it tries to clarify this applies to any abilities that come from being undead, including an undead's innate spells, but does not count against any prepared or spontaneous spells the undead may have. Honestly, they could have just easily written this one up as you get a +2. Is it +2? No. Whenever you roll a success on a saving throw against a save from an undead source, you get a critical success instead, unless that is from prepared or spontaneous spellcasting. it just feels weird. If it's very strangely worded, and I think I had a different way of phrasing it earlier, but this part was very strange. Essentially, if an undead is making you make a will save, when you roll a success, you get a critical success instead, unless it's from prepared or spontaneous spellcasting, which is very powerful, makes you really good against undead targets. It's just very particular and very straightforward. So I don't know. The dedication itself is good and it has good effects. It just has some jank, which we're gonna see here more and more as we keep going forward. Next up is Ashen Veil. Now, this one comes from the Knights of Last Wall book, and it's 3 actions, which is a lot. But it is a skill feat, which I thoroughly enjoy skill feats, if you know me. It does require that you are level 7 when you select this, and you also need to be an expert in religion and a master in stealth. Now, this is going to be something that we're going to see here commonly, but we saw that the dedication required proficiencies in both stealth and survival. Now we're throwing in religion, and you also need to be an expert in religion to gain access to this particular skill feat. And a master in stealth, which is very specific. Again, a lot of this archetype's major problem in my eyes is it's very particular, and that's not... It's very restrictive because it requires so many proficiencies if you want to really delve into this archetype. And if you want to get another archetype, you need to pick 3 feats from this or or the Last Wall Sentry or Night Vigilant. We're going to see more of this, and I'll bring it up a little bit later, but there's just a lot of skill proficiency requirements for this particular archetype. Ashen Veil, though, is a very good effect, actually an incredibly powerful effect. Though it is 3 actions, you coat yourself in some kind of dirt or ash from blighted land, and you become concealed undead using vision or life sense. If they have any kind of like imprecise sense that's other than these, they might be able to detect you easily. But for the most part, you're going to be constantly concealed to undead, which is very powerful in itself. And this allows you to hide and sneak without needing cover or concealment, which is very strange that they mention that because this says you become concealed. So is the concealed not the condition you have? Or like, is it just a thing where the undead sees you until you crouch down and start sneaking? Or are you actually concealed and this is what's allowing you to stealth? That is... You could become concealed. Yeah, the wording here is very strange. I would rule it as you become concealed undead. But maybe the intent is... Okay, let me read the rest of it and then I'll go through the intent. So, the effects last as long as you continue to take no actions other than hide, sneak, or other surreptitious actions. The DM determines which actions end the effect, but attacking, casting spells, activating items, and the like always do. So... More or less, this allows you to hide from undead, sneaking around, doing sneaky things, probably outside of combat more, but this can be done in combat, obviously, allowing you to sneak around undead. So, being constantly concealed works, except... So what does this action do, right? 3 actions, and you coat yourself, and you become concealed to undead, allowing you to hide or sneak. Now, this effect ends until you take no actions other than hide, sneak, or stealth. So 3 actions, do you actually hide as a part of this action? Or are you... How do you take more than... The takes no actions other than hide, sneak, or other surreptitious... Yeah. What does it mean? Because you can't do any of those actions when Ashen Veil is used, because it's 3 actions, right? So I don't know. And is the concealing... So does this ashen covering that you put yourself on allow you to hide, do an action, and then hide again, keeping the benefits of the concealed? Do you even have concealed? This action doesn't make any sense. My interpretation of what it means is that you coat yourself with this, allowing you to hide or sneak in plain sight from undead, and you know, that's it. You are considered concealed to undead, and this lets you hide and seek, even if you're not getting the concealed condition, and instead this just allows you to hide or sneak without concealment. I think that's incredibly powerful. I'd make it 2 actions rather than 3 actions, or I'd make hiding as a part of the action. But other than that, I think it works really, really well. But rules as written, it says you become concealed to undead, which means you gain the concealed condition. But then it states you can do so without cover or concealment, but you already have concealed. I don't know. And then it says the effect lasts only until you take another action besides these things. So does that mean that you can no longer hide after that and you just wait, you have to do another 3 action thing? I really don't know. This is very strange. And I feel like this particular feat needs to be completely rewritten because it doesn't really work. If you use my interpretation where it's 2 actions, you become concealed to undead, or you can hide from undead without needing concealment, I think that's good enough. I think that's really, really strong. And that's all you really need from it. But Ashen Veil, potentially really good, but insanely wonky in the wording and design. All right, next up, Voice Cold as Death. I thoroughly like this action, but it also doesn't work most of the time. So, this one's interesting, and it works against not undead stuff necessarily, but it has a bunch of traits here. It's auditory, concentrate, emotion, fear, mental, and skill, which means it's another skill feat, which I thoroughly enjoy. It's a single action, and essentially you make a demoralized check, though you can't benefit from something like intimidating glare or any other benefits that would remove the verbal trait, the auditory trait from the feat, essentially. So it must use auditory, which I think is fine. I think that's really good. If you critically succeed on the check, the enemy becomes stunned 1 or stunned 2 if it's undead. After using this feat, you are fatigued until the end of your next turn, and you can't use this feat again until the end of your next turn, which is very strange. But anyway, it does make sense. It's just worded weirdly. So more or less, this allows you to, when you crit a demoralize, to stun the enemy. My problem with this is, 1, this doesn't actually remove the necessity for the mental trait that a mindless undead have. So you can't do this against mindless undead, which a lot of undead are mindless. So it doesn't work against undead most the time, or a good number of the times. It has to be against intelligent undead specifically, which is weird considering it has a special effect for undead. And it only works on a critical, but it makes you fatigued, which makes a -1 to all saves, and actually prevents you from using other class features like Rage until the end of your next turn. That's incredibly powerful for just a critical effect on Demoralize. Now, what I would do for Voice Cold as Death is I'd make it once per 10 minutes. I'd also give this the incapacitation trait, which it actually doesn't have the incapacitation trait, which is nuts. Also remove the requirements for you are not fatigued, because that makes no sense. And what I would just do is attempt to demoralize check against a target within, it doesn't even, I guess it's demoralized, so 30 feet. Within range, you can't benefit from feats like Intimidating Glare or anything that would remove the auditory trait. And if the enemy crit fails it, or if you crit succeed, they become stunned 1. Or if they're an intelligent undead, they're stunned 2. Then you can't use this same feat again against that target for another 10 minutes. That would make it a lot easier to use, remove a lot of the guff. And also, this can technically be used to stun the boss pretty easily once every other turn. At the cost of fatiguing yourself. I would actually remove that for how I would run it personally. But rules as written, how it's designed, is it's a single action. You can't benefit from anything that removes the auditory trait from Demoralize. You can stun on a critical success, stun 1 or stun 2 if they're undead. And you then become fatigued until the end of your next turn. And you cannot do this while fatigued. It's very messy. I do think it's really good. It's very potentially powerful. but it's wonky. And a lot of these feats are really wonky. I don't know. I think it's a good feat. I think it's really good, but man, is it really messy and somewhat complicated. All right, next up is Invoke the Crimson Oath, one of their core abilities in my opinion. It gives you access to the Invoke the Crimson Oath focus spell, and if, this also gives you all the standard stuff whenever you get a focus point or a focus spell, you get 1 focus point up to a maximum of 3, remaster or otherwise. If you weren't trained in divine spell attacks, you become trained in divine spell attacks and DCs, and your spellcasting ability modifier for this is charisma, which is really good. I will state, though, that one of the bad things about this is this also kind of technically adds another requirement for this particular archetype, where now you need to have a decent charisma if you want to get the benefits of the Crimson Oath. Well, let's look into it and see if that's even worth it. So, Invoke the Crimson Oath is actually a really good ability. It is 2 actions and actually has a requirement that you're brandishing a weapon. So what happens is essentially you slash your weapon and it creates a 20-foot cone where all enemies in that cone take the effects of your attack. What it states here is you deal normal melee damage for your weapon, including appropriate bonuses, penalties, modifiers, and properties to each creature in the spell's area. They must each attempt a basic fort save. Creatures that critically fail the save also suffer an additional effect you would normally inflict when your weapon critically hits. If that creature critically fails its save, is also immune to critical hits, it merely fails the save instead. So that's a lot of words that are completely unnecessary. Oh, also you can convert all physical damage from the strike into what's going to be vitality damage against all undead creatures in this area. It says positive, but in the remaster, it'll be vitality damage. This all could just have been like shortened down to just you make a 20-foot cone, all enemies must make a fort save against your spell DC or suffer the effects of the damage of one of your strikes. They're plain and easy, very simple, and way less wordy. It's good. It's a good ability. My only gripe with this one is, of course, it's a trained proficiency, and you get this at like level 8, which trained proficiency at level 8 is a little rough. Enemies are more than likely to succeed, but that's okay because it's a 20-foot cone, and you're likely to hit, at least 2-3 enemies. So you're gonna essentially get more than a strike's worth of damage out with this use, which makes it really strong. It feels like if you're the player, you're going to want to have better charisma and a better DC if you're going to want to get even more bang for your buck with this, which makes this a little bit hard because that's a lot of stat investment just for this one archetype. Regardless, Invoke the Crimson Oath, I think, is genuinely a good focus spell and a really good feat from the Knight Reclaimant. All right, next up is Reactive Pursuit. This is just a feat from the Rogue, so I'm not going to get into it too much. It's a reaction that allows you to essentially maintain adjacency to an enemy that attempts to move away from you. Now, only works if the stride you would do would make you land in an adjacent square next to the enemy. So if it's a very fast creature, obviously they might easily outrun you and you can't use this. But as long as you can at least be adjacent to the creature with a single stride, you can use this, which makes it good. Though, as a reaction, I'm not sure. It's an okay feat overall. I think it's pretty good. Next up is Scout's Warning, another one from Ranger and Rogue. So again, I'm not going to get too much into it, but it's a free action that essentially gives everyone in your party a +1 circumstance bonus to their initiative rolls when you roll either perception or survival for your initiative. And I actually like this one because it goes off of the survival proficiency you initially needed to pick up the Knight Reclaimant. So it works out pretty well. Scout's Warning, I think, is overall a very generally good feat, though obviously it prevents you from benefiting from sneaking, because one of the benefits of sneaking is that you can then use stealth for initiative rather than your perception. This does allow you to use survival in some situations, though, which could be good. But the whole thing about the Knight Reclaimant is you're supposed to be really sneaky. So it kind of contradicts the design of it. But I do like it, and I do think it warrants being here. All right, next up is Survivor of Desolation. This is a genuinely good one, in my opinion. This gives you a +2 circumstance bonus to saving throws against unnatural weather events from or environmental hazards occurring in blighted or otherwise marred regions. If you roll a success on the saving throw against such an effect, you get a critical success instead. And if you roll a crit failure, you get a failure instead. This doesn't apply to unnatural events created by spells or like created effects by creatures or the like, but the natural environment anyway. This is really good, and this can be used even outside of the intended purpose. The Sakara Scar and all that region with all the still kind of demonic threat over it, technically you can benefit from that as well. So overall, I thoroughly like this one. I think it's a really good feat in general, and it just makes your character better at traversing, which is what the Night Reclaimants do. They go out into the Eye of Dread regions, places that are conquered by essentially Tarbafon's forces, and attempt to reclaim old settlements, important structures, or the like. So this makes 100% sense, and overall is a really good thematic feat. Next up is Hilt Hammer, another pretty good one, though I think another a little bit weird one, just from the wording again. This one also comes from the Knights of Lastwall book. So essentially, this gives any melee weapon you're wielding the versatile bludgeoning trait, allowing you to switch up your attacks to bludgeoning damage if you're dealing with like a skeletal enemy that has a weakness to bludgeoning damage. Now, you can use the weapon only to deal bludgeoning damage when making melee attacks. I don't know what that means. The only time you may use a weapon to do bludgeoning damage is an attack. If I'm not mistaken, and I might be, this might just be a weird rule thing that I've missed. Even if you were to attack a construct or an object, rather, in the environment, you still make an attack roll against said object. So I'm not sure. Maybe that's not the case. I don't know. They probably should have said you can only use the weapon only to deal bludgeoning damage. You can use the weapon only to deal bludgeoning damage when making melee attacks against a creature, construct, or similar type of enemy. Maybe, I don't know. It's very weird, but overall I like this one. It just gives your weapon versatility. It's good. Honestly, very solid. There's a lot of ways. Now, it does say that the GM could say a weapon can't benefit from it, but I literally can't think of a single weapon that can't be turned into a bludgeoning weapon in some form or fashion. And it has to be a melee weapon, so you can't even like argue about arrows or anything like that. So I don't know what GM would do something like maybe I'll in the comments below can give me an idea. I'm not sure, but I like this feat. It's really good, and honestly, just adding traits to your weapon is very powerful. And at this point, we are about halfway through the video, so real quick, I'm just going to remind you all that if you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see more content like this, please like the video and or subscribe, or both, please, as there's not many channels out there who are going deep dive into the archetypes. I think my channel is really the only one who goes this in depth. And as well, I also release build videos for Pathfinder 2nd Edition and all kinds of other good TTRPG content. So if you want to be a part of that, please join the channel. And as well, we also have a Discord linked in the description that you can go to if you are needing to look for any groups. We have lots of people constantly looking for parties, as well as just talking about tabletop stuff in general. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and continue with the video. All right, this next feat is actually a rare feat, and it comes from the Legends book. This is a feat that is associated with Clarith Imodar, the founder of the Knights Reclaimant, and Shall Not Falter, Shall Not Rout is a really good focus spell. So this is an armed focus spell. So if you took the prior one, now you get another focus point to your maximum of 3, and all the same jazz. But let's look at the focus spell itself. So this is actually an incredibly powerful one, and one that I feel suits the Knights Reclaimant a little bit more, because it really doesn't use your spell DC at all. What it does is when you activate it, the first time you activate it, and the first time you strike an enemy each round with a weapon and deal damage to that foe, you recover a number of HP equal to twice twice this focus spell's level, and the healing can't raise your HP above half your maximum HP. I'm actually really happy with this particular focus spell, and I think we need more stuff like this. This is a really good one, and it's not very easy to make this broken because it can only get you up to half your HP, which is really good, honestly. It allows a playstyle choice of you only get benefits from this one when you're getting down and low on HP, making players want to play a little bit more risky, knowing that they have a bit of a safety net around it. And it's very powerful. I mean, when you pick this one up initially, you get 10 HP whenever or the first time you successfully strike an enemy each round, which is really good. And every time the focus point or the focus spell goes up a level, it increases by 2 HP, which is even better. At max level, at level 20, you'll be getting, let's see, that's going to be a level 10, yeah, 20 HP. I should have known that. Easy. 20 HP the first time you strike an enemy. That's really good, and this can stack with like regeneration effects. So overall, Shall Not Falter, Shall Not Rout is really, really good. Next up is one of my favorite feats from this line, Blade of the Crimson Oath. It's 2 actions, and essentially it is a powerful weapon or unarmed strike against an undead foe. It's a power attack. The strike deals 2 extra damage dice, and you can convert all the damage from this strike, well, all the physical damage specifically. So if you have runes, those don't convert, but everything else can, into vitality damage, which is really good against undead. Very good. It's a power strike that works better against undead targets, making it technically a little bit worse than power attack, but the fact that you can make it into vitality damage actually makes it better because it's something that a lot of undead are just weak to. So Blade of the Crimson Oath, a really, really good feat. All right, next up is Camouflage, another feat from the Ranger. So, this one does require a Master in Stealth, but that's okay. This entire archetype is focused around that. And what it does is when you're in natural terrain, you can hide and sneak even without cover or being concealed, which is exactly what that 1 feat earlier should have just... The 1 feat earlier that was so complicated could have just been this. Could have just been this particular feat, because this is very simple and makes a lot of sense. And honestly is better because it doesn't take 3 actions. So yeah, Camouflage, a really, really good feat, especially in comparison to Ashen Veil. Next up is For Love and for Lightning, another rare feat from this one comes from the Knights of Lastwall book. And this one is another one that you must get from Clarith specifically. If you're going with access rules, though it does state in the description of it that many have mastered this sense who didn't need to get Clarith's permission. In any regard, it has an access saying a character who performs a specialized mission for Clarith Amadar as access to this option. That's a fun thing for society play, which I really like. I like the fact that you can do essentially a day or day or two at society play and get a really cool feat out of it. It's very solid. Anyway, this is another focus spell that does a really cool thing, so we'll hop on over to that. So this one is 3 actions, and it kind of costs you your weapon, at least temporarily. Now, it does require that you're wielding a sword or spear made partially or wholly of metal, which is very typically common. It's very hard to find weapons that aren't. And this particular spell can be sustained up for a minute. So when you cast this spell and when you sustain this spell, a red arc of lightning strikes an enemy within 30 feet, making them roll a reflex saving throw against 3d12 electricity damage. Now, if you interact to draw the weapon from the ground, the spell ends immediately. I like this one, and this is another really, really good focus spell because it's very unique. It does cost you the use of a weapon because the weapon must be in the ground in order to benefit from it, but there's no saying you can't leave it, draw another weapon, or the like. It is 3 actions, which is a little bit much because it's already a sustained spell. I think it could have been 2 actions and still maintain the same level of, it wouldn't be broken because it's sustained. So you have to sacrifice an action every round to use it anyway, and its effect is not particularly that powerful. It's just when you cast it, and the first time during each of your subsequent turns, the Crimson Lightning strikes, arcing to a target within 30 feet and making them do 3d12 electricity damage on a basic reflex saving throw. So for costing both a weapon and 3 actions and sustain, this focus spell is actually really bad, in all honesty. It's just a lot of extra stuff for what is a really cool attack, don't get me wrong, but it's not that strong, honestly. And I mean, there's nothing here saying the enemy can't draw it out. It just says you can, but if the enemy draws it out, does it end? I don't know. Very strange, and something that's very common with a lot of the Knights of Last Wall book particular feats is I feel like they just didn't do the right design like overlook to make sure everything fit and made sense. I like this particular focus spell. I think it's very fun, but there's just better uses of your action. Now, if you're playing a martial class, right? This is actually not terrible. But if you're playing a martial class, your actions are a little bit more valuable than spellcasters typically. Thus, having a sustained action to keep doing this is going to be painful, but it could be worth it. I don't know. I wish this, and it also is a focus spell. It costs a focus point. So it costs a focus point, expends a weapon, is 3 actions to cast, and is sustained. There's so many downsides to using this one, even though it's a really, really cool effect. For Love and for Lightning, I think is just not good. Unfortunately, I like it, but it's just not good. Reaper of Repose is our next feat, and is a very strange one because it's the only feat I've come across so far. Maybe there's one I missed a while ago. I don't know. It's very, very, very unusual that this requires a proficiency in a weapon to use. Even class feats don't typically do that. And obviously for good reason, but still. Reaper of Repose only works if you have master proficiency in a weapon. And when you make an attack using a weapon with which you are master proficient and hit an undead creature, you ignore 5 points of the creature's resistance, and the undead's weaknesses are 2 higher against your attacks. That effect, so essentially it reduces resistances by 5 and increases weaknesses by 2. That's good, don't get me wrong, that's feat worthy, that's worthy of picking up a feat, but it's not so necessary that it requires a master proficiency in a weapon to utilize. Most martials by level 12, which is the level you would be able to pick this up at, are already master proficiency. So all this requirement or prerequisite does is prevents like spellcasters or characters who have like non-standard progression from picking this up. Like Alchemist couldn't technically select this one because they never get master proficiency with their strikes. So this just makes this feat unviable for a lot of classes who might want to go into something like this, which I feel is very strange, especially with so many of the abilities focusing around spells and the such. I don't know. I don't like the proficiency. I think they can remove the proficiency. I don't think it's necessary. The effect is good, just not good enough to require it, in my opinion. Reaper of Repose, though, is a good feat. The requirement is just weird, and I don't like it. Reclaimant's Plea. This is a bizarre one because it seems out of place here. I like the effects, again, but it feels weird. So essentially what it is you must have the ability to cast divine spells. So if you picked up any of the prior focus spells, you actually qualify for this. Now, essentially, you call upon the power of the Crimson Oath, this strange entity, to gain access to another spell for a once-a-day cast. And essentially, you can get Airwalk, Dimension Anchor, Freedom of Movement, Invisibility, Remove Curse, and Searing Light. And you can cast them as 4th level spells. Now, when you level up to 14 and 16, they go up to 5th and 6th respectively, which is cool. And honestly, I don't know if it's super relevant to them, but it's good overall. And if you anger the mysterious source of the Crimson Oath, you lose the ability to cast the spells until you atone, which I think is strange, but fine. I'm all for that, okay? So none of this so far is very weird. You get access to a really good spell. Most of them are mobility based, though you do have Searing Light, which is a really good damaging spell. But then there's this special tag. The special tag states that you can select this feat a second time at level 14 to gain a second spell of either any of the above or Death Ward or Flame Strike, which you can also cast once per day. You also become an expert in divine spell attack DCs and spell attack rolls, and then you can select this again at 18th level to get another spell of all the above or Sunburst, and you become a master of divine and spell DCs, and all three of the spells are heightened to 7th level. Why I don't like this, or why this is strange, is this, excuse me, this particular archetype gives you master proficiency in spellcasting, which is huge, but you have to take the same feat 3 times, which is okay, but this is like a lot of your end game feats. You don't get many more feats after level 12, right? So that's a very heavy investment for, I think, a very justifiable cost. Can give your character a lot of things, and works with a lot of the prior feats. So what's my problem? Well, my problem is this is just strange. Why would they do this in this way? Usually you get like other feats or something. And not only that, but like this is a very like necessary thing to take. So it just takes up a lot of feat space for extra spells. It's not like a choice to me personally of like, this is good and you can pick up the later feats if you want. This is like, if you pick this one, you're going to want to pick the later feats because it just makes your spell casting generally better, especially if you're picking the more offensive spells. I like this one. I think it's good. It's just very strange compared to a lot of them. And I'm all for, especially giving marshals the ability to use spells more easily. This particular feat can be used in a lot of ways. Really, really good. It's just strange. I don't know. A lot of the writing in the Knights of Last Wall book is very strange. But Reclaimant Plea, I think, is genuinely a good feat. Or feats, I guess. Shepherd of Desolation is the upgraded version of Survivor of Desolation, though this one's also a weird feat. Essentially, you increase the +2, or you give all allies within 10 feet the benefit of the +2 circumstance against unnatural terrains and hazards to your allies. Now, it says if you're a champion, this aura is also considered a champion's aura, which means it can benefit from any feats you get that increase the size of your champion's aura or the whatever. I like it. It's just a weird feat. It's very strange, in my opinion, because it just seems very, I don't know, all over the place. It says if you're a champion, you can treat this as a champion's aura. This whole, even if you gained it outside of champion, is completely unnecessary. But I like it. It's a good feat, and it works, especially for protecting your allies, which is a big knight thing to do. So overall, Shepherd of Desolation, pretty good. All right, we're getting to the last few feats here, so hang tight with me. Next up is Sneak Savant, which is a very powerful rogue feat, if I'm going to be honest. And what it does is it makes it impossible to spot you. Essentially, whenever you fail a sneak check, you get a success instead, but you can still critically fail. So more or less what it does, just to restate, is if you ever fail a sneak check, you actually succeed instead, but you can still critically fail, which is incredibly powerful. This is a very good one. And again, it requires master proficiency in stealth, which is not bad, honestly speaking. All right, next up is Crimson Oath Devotion, another really good one. And what it does essentially is whenever you refocus, you get to refocus 2 points rather than 1. And if you didn't take the Reclaimant's Plea, this one will give you the expert proficiency in divine spell attacks and spell DCs, which is something you'd more expect from this particular archetype, honestly speaking. So overall, it's a really good one. It's just a buff to your prior things and makes it so you recover your focus points faster, which just makes it really good. All right, and the last feat. I had to go minicam for this one because there wasn't a good way to not be blocking any text. So the Tyrant Falls is 2 actions. It's a level 20 feat, and it's incredibly powerful. And I'm going to state, first of all, I might have some complaints about this one, but it's level 20, so I honestly don't care. It's something that even if you do get access to, you're not going to be able to use it for that long. And most level 20 feats are actually really powerful anyway. So you can use this once per day, and it's 2 actions. Essentially, you go into this empowered form for 1 minute, and then afterwards you're incredibly drained. What it does is at the beginning of each of your turns, you become drained 1 or increase the value of your drain condition by 1. If you're already drained, you can't reduce the values of your drain condition or remove it from the Tyrant's Fall while the Tyrant Falls, my god, is active. Your drain condition, though, does not penalize your fortitude saves. So drain typically reduces your health by your level times the drain value, which is pretty massive, honestly, 20 per at this point. And it also reduces your fort saves. But when you're using this, there's not that penalty. So besides dropping your health every round by 20 points, this is actually really good. Now, what it gives you, the reasons for this massive downside of essentially it taxing your body, is you can invoke the Crimson Oath, the focus spell, without expending focus points. And when you do, you can increase the area to 40 feet. You double its size. That's massive. And essentially, it just does your weapon damage. Granted, it uses your saves. So if you don't have a good save at this point, you're probably going to be not doing a ton with this. But it's really, really good, actually. The fact that you just get that, it's super powerful, honestly. You also gain resistance to all damage equal to half your character level. So you resist all damage by 10, undead or otherwise. Again, very powerful. And any melee weapon you are wielding gains the reach trait or extends its reach by 5 feet if it already had the reach trait. Your strikes with the weapon deal an additional 2d6 vitality damage or negative damage, whichever is more effective against the target, and you don't have to choose when you use this ability. So, I can increase my camera here. This is a powerful, powerful, powerful effect. You go Super Saiyan. You do this, and at the cost of 20 HP per turn, more or less, you are resistant to a bunch of damage, which helps kind of negate the health loss. And you can use Invoke the Crimson Oath without expending your focus points, leaving your focus points for other things, and as well, your weapon gains reach and does extra vitality damage or negative or void damage, sorry. And this is very powerful. For level 20, it feels like a level 20 feat. It's very, very powerful, to say the least. I think this is really cool and maybe a little too strong compared to some other level 20 feats. But whatever, it's level 20. I really don't care, honestly. It's really cool, and it kind of encompasses the Knight's Reclaimant, where you take the power and you push yourself past your limits. A very cool feat. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. So my thoughts in general are this archetype is very messy. It's messy in a lot of ways. I did genuinely like a lot of the feats, and most of them are pretty good, though some of them were a little wonky, especially Ashen Veil over here. But it overall has good feats. And the wording could be a little bit better, so hopefully this video helped you all kind of understand what some of the feats were intended to be like. And my gripes are mostly just the wording on some of the features are just bad. The obviously different authors wrote some of these feats, so some of them are very clean and others are just very, very messy. And in addition, this archetype requires a lot of stat investment. You have to be trained in survival. You have to become master in stealth to get most of the benefits, and expert in religion, and there's a feat that requires master proficiency with weapons, which means that if you're not a class that normally gets master proficiency, that feat is just completely not for you. Which is very sad, because a Knight Reclaimant, there's no reason why you couldn't be a spellcaster. And even though as a spellcaster, you wouldn't necessarily use a weapon, so it's not a huge feat loss, I just don't see the reason for it. If I'm making like an alchemist Knight Reclaimant, let me just get the benefit of the feat without penalizing me needlessly. I don't know. It's just so bizarre. And as well, like Ashen Veil just doesn't seem to work at all. It's a very, very strange one. Voice Cold as Death also is very just encumbrant to use. So I don't know. I genuinely do like this archetype, but it is just messy in a lot of ways. And I think honestly, it could do better. Honestly, it could just get some sprucing up. Obviously, in the remaster, I hope they fix a lot of the wording in this because obviously they're going to need to for some of this. Granted, who knows when they'll ever actually get to this, if they'll ever get to it at all, because, you know, the remaster doesn't change how most of this works. It just changes how vitality works versus positive damage. Same with negative and void damage. So other than that, you know, they might not ever touch this, which would be sad because I think this needs a pretty heavy errata, honestly speaking. I think there's some things in here that could just be cleaned up quite a bit. But that's going to be it for me. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. I know it's a really long one. The Knights of Last Wall stuff are just intense, I'll say the least. But, you know, they are cool. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.